You know, when you think of US presidents, certain names pop right into your head. But what about the one who, well, was never even supposed to be president? A guy who inherits a total mess, gets booted from his own party, and then, completely by accident, ends up creating one of the most critical rules in American democracy. Yeah, let's talk about John Tyler.
So, right from the get-go, his enemies had a nickname for him, and it wasn't a nice one. They called him his Accidency. It was totally meant as a dig, right? A way to paint him as this illegitimate leader who just stumbled into the White House. And, to be fair, they kind of had a point.
Okay, so how did this all go down? Just look at this timeline. William Henry Harrison wins the presidency, gives this super long inaugural speech out in the cold, and boom, 31 days later, he's dead. Just 1 month. This was a huge deal. I mean, it was completely uncharted territory. America had never, ever lost a president in office. A full-blown constitutional crisis was starting to brew, and honestly, nobody really knew what was supposed to happen next. And the whole thing boiled down to one massive question. Does the vice president become the actual president with all the power that comes with it? Or is he just kind of an acting president? You know, a temp, a placeholder? The Constitution was surprisingly fuzzy on this point, and you can bet Congress was gearing up for a major fight.
But here's the thing. John Tyler, he didn't wait around for Congress to tell him what to do. Nope. He made a really bold, really decisive move. He basically said, I am the president, full stop. He took the full oath of office, moved right into the White House, and just like that, he established what we now call the Tyler precedent. It's incredible, but that one single act has pretty much guaranteed a stable, peaceful transfer of power ever since.
Okay, so as if all that political chaos wasn't enough, it was happening at the exact same time as a devastating economic crisis. I mean, talk about bad timing. Tyler didn't just inherit a constitutional puzzle, he inherited an absolute financial train wreck. You see, the country was still completely shell-shocked from something called the Panic of 1837. This was a massive depression that had literally wiped out almost 40% of the entire nation's banking capital. Think about that. Businesses were going belly up, unemployment was through the roof, the whole economy was just in a total freefall. And it wasn't just a domestic problem. On the world stage, things were just as grim. America's credit, it was basically shot. Lenders in places like London and Paris looked at the US and saw a huge risk. They were demanding these insane interest rates, like up to 10%, just to loan the government money. So the country couldn't even afford to borrow its way out of the mess. In this chart, it lays out the core problem perfectly. I mean, look at this. The government was spending around $26 million a year, but it was only taking in about $14.8 million. That is a massive deficit, and there was no obvious way to close that gap. So the big question is, what was his Accidency gonna do to fix this incredible mess? Well, his solution, let's just say it was gonna make his own political party turn on him and make him one of the loneliest, most isolated presidents in all of American history. To really get why this was so explosive, you've got to understand the politics. See, Tyler was a Whig. That was the party that put him on the ticket. But his personal beliefs were the complete opposite of the party's platform. The Whigs wanted a powerful national bank to get the economy back on track. But Tyler, he was a Southern guy, a big believer in states' rights, and he thought a big central bank was flat out unconstitutional. He was basically a ticking time bomb planted right inside his own party. And boy, did that bomb go off. The Whigs passed their big bill for a new national bank. Tyler vetoes it. So they tweak it, try again with another bill. He vetoes that one too. The backlash was instantaneous and brutal. His entire cabinet, except for one guy, the Secretary of State, resigned in protest. And then the Whig Party did something that had never been done before. They officially kicked him out of the party. A president without a party. And the hostility? Oh, it didn't stop there, not by a long shot. His opponents in Congress were so angry, they actually introduced the first ever impeachment resolution against a sitting president. Now, it didn't end up going anywhere, but it just goes to show you how absolutely toxic things had gotten between him and Congress. So let's recap. He's a man with no party, he's facing impeachment, everyone's mocking him as an accident. By all rights, this should be where his presidency just fizzles out into a complete failure. But this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Okay, so the national bank idea was dead in the water. Tyler had to find another way to fix the government's money problems. His answer was something called the Tariff of 1842. Now, it was super controversial, but you know what? It actually worked. You can see right here how much revenue shot up. It was over a 30% increase. That tariff immediately stabilized the budget and started chipping away at that giant deficit. So now that the country's finances were a little more stable, Tyler's administration could actually start looking beyond its own borders. And it's wild because while all this political drama was happening at home, he was quietly racking up some huge wins in foreign policy. He settled a really important border dispute with Great Britain. He signed a treaty that opened up trade with China for the very first time. And this is the big one, he laid all the groundwork for the annexation of Texas.
And when you look closer at the Texas annexation, you realize there's this hidden financial strategy behind it all. This wasn't just about getting more land. No, this was about dominating the global cotton market, getting new ports on the Gulf Coast to bring in more money, and maybe most importantly, shutting down British economic influence in the area. It was a huge economic power move, plain and simple. So you end up with this picture of an accidental president who somehow, against all the odds, turns into a pretty effective financial manager for the country. But Tyler's full story, his complete legacy, is way more complicated than that. And honestly, it's also a lot more troubling. Because you just can't talk about John Tyler without facing the deepest, most profound contradiction of his entire life. He was a slave owner, and he was a passionate, lifelong defender of slavery. He didn't just accept it, he fought to protect it and to expand it. And that belief would come to define the very end of his life. And this really lays it out perfectly. You have these two John Tylers. On one hand, you have the preserver of the presidency, the guy who set that crucial succession precedent, stabilized the economy, and expanded the country. But on the other hand, you have the betrayer of the nation, the man who fervently defended slavery, supported secession, and ultimately sided with the Confederacy. And if you want a final, powerful symbol of that betrayal, here it is. When John Tyler died in 1862 during the Civil War, President Lincoln didn't even acknowledge it. There was no official recognition from the U.S. government. He was buried in Richmond, Virginia, and his coffin wasn't draped with the American flag. It was draped with the flag of the Confederacy. To this day, he is the only U.S. president buried under what was, at the time, a foreign flag.
So what are we left with? We're left trying to make sense of these two completely conflicting legacies. Was John Tyler a tragic failure? A man whose absolute defense of slavery just completely overshadows anything else he did? Or was he the accidental architect of American power? A president whose messy, controversial, and deeply conflicted time in office somehow, in spite of everything, set the stage for the nation's future? That's the really complicated question John Tyler leaves us with.